Fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. This is a bit of an experiment. It's a solo pod, it's just me. So if you want to tune out, do so straight away. Doing a little bit of an update and talking a bit about what's going on in Tennis Nerd and with my playtesting and also on the Pro Tour. A little bit of pro player racket experiments and switches that's been going on. So I know you like that. So maybe it's worth listening to. Talking to you here on Monday morning. Looking forward to a sunny week in Spain. It's been raining buckets. It's been raining pretty much the whole month of March and maybe a bit before that. I don't remember when it's been this bad before here in south of Spain, but it's been really bad. And that's been very tough for tennis coaches who have to go out on the court every day and give lessons, and that is their livelihood. So it's been a very challenging time for them. Obviously, as a playtester, it's also been tricky to book courts and make sure you test rackets. I've been a little bit on and off. Sometimes you're lucky and the rain comes 1 hour after you've played, and sometimes you're unlucky and as soon as you enter the court, the rain starts pouring down, and that's really annoying and one of the most frustrating things, and I'm sure you can relate. It's happened to all of us. In Marbella, where I am right now, there are no indoor courts, proper indoor courts. You can drive about 45 minutes towards the airport in Malaga, and then they have some courts underneath a roof, but no indoor courts, making it very difficult to play tennis if it rains. And it's something I hope that they start thinking about and working on after this pretty torrential downpour that we've had for such a long time, because there are a lot of pros living here, training here, and for them it's obviously impossible to be here if it just keeps raining for a period. That's quite rare. Usually we have the sun here pretty regularly, but this period it's been rough. Now I'm back to playing tennis myself. I actually signed up to play a tournament, which I will probably regret as soon as I step onto the court. Usually I am not the best at performing in tournaments compared to training or playing training matches. But I'm working on it, and I thought it would be good to get out of the comfort zone a little bit. It's usually good to challenge yourself. And I'm curious to hear if you are playing any tournaments yourself, how you're doing in them. A question I asked in the newsletter that we send out from now every Monday. So please subscribe if you're interested in this kind of rambling, but it's a little bit of everything in the newsletter. So Miami Open, that's what's going on the Pro Tour. I'm not a huge fan of these 2-week Masters. It feels like they go on forever, especially if you have a little bit of a run where your favorite players or the favorites, they lose early. And in this case, we had Alcaraz lose in his first match to Goffin. Goffin is a good ball striker. He has been around for a long time. Not been doing so well maybe in the recent years, maybe due to injury. I'm not quite sure. I've not been following him so much, but I like watching his style, and he really took it to Alcaraz. He played super aggressive tennis and managed to win. Not sure what to think about this for Carlitos, because I love watching him. He's an exciting player to watch, always a smile on his face, but he seems to struggle a little bit recently. Of course, he got to the final in Indian Wells, lost to Jack Draper. No shame in that. Draper had an amazing week, but still, you expect so much from this kid, and sometimes you get shocked when he loses early. He has definitely a lot more ups and downs than Jannik Sinner, who is now banned from playing on the tour until May due to this doping situation. So, bit of a shame, bit of a dent in the tournament as such to have him out so early. Goffin then lost in the next match to Nakashima. I think Nakashima is looking super strong overall. Could be like an outsider to winning this tournament. Talking about Jack Draper, he also got beaten by another young up-and-coming player called Jakub Mensik. Very dangerous guy, 2 tiebreak sets. Not really much to talk about. I think you always have a bit of a hangover when you win a tournament, then you have to then go the next week and play another Masters. It's a very tough schedule. It's super rare that someone wins 2 Masters in a row, as you can see in history. So, yeah, not surprised that actually he had a little bit of a letdown after such a impressive 2 weeks in Indian Wells. Another upset on the cards, Andrew Rublev, he lost to Sisu Bergs. I'm not really that surprised anymore when some of these players lose, because the tour is just getting tougher and tougher and tougher. There's so many good players. It's definitely tough to stay and be dominant in the same way that we saw with Roger, Rafa, and Novak. Although Novak is doing well in this tournament, it is tough to see anyone dominate the tour. Last guy we saw was Sinner, and maybe he can do it again when he's back, but it's becoming more and more difficult. And talk about that, Daniil Medvedev, a guy I really like to watch for his unorthodox style. He also lost in his first match. Not so surprised by this. Seems to have lost his way a bit this year. Struggles to win matches that I would say 2 years ago or so looked relatively easy for him. He does complain about the balls a lot. He is the most vocal player about it. Zverev has also talked about it. Some others as well. I'm not sure if it's gets into his head too much and makes him unable to perform, or because of his style, like he's playing a lot more counter attacking and moving the ball around, playing a bit more chess on the court with flatter game style than most other players, and the slower balls and maybe slower courts are hurting him a bit, and that's what we've seen this year. And also last year he did not win one ATP tournament, so this is quite rare for a player of his talent, because he's a very talented guy and fun to watch, but he is struggling, whether it's mentally or it's gear or something else. It's hard to tell. Some players are looking to counter these balls, these bad balls. I mean, we can get into that discussion. I've talked about it before. Some people don't like when you get into the balls because they don't agree. They think that the balls are the same, but it's more the strings and the equipment that is making a difference. The players are hitting harder, but I've heard from other sources that they are using lower quality rubber. So that's what I've heard. I don't know for sure anything. It's just what it's just the stuff that goes around, and the complaints have been for a while now. So something has happened since the pandemic. That's pretty sure. That seems to be the case, at least. If we talk about players with new rackets, we have Tsitsipas and Bublik, two blacked out frames that look very much like arrows. They're both out of the event with pretty lackluster performances. So I wouldn't say Bublik is a favorite, but Tsitsipas, he won in Dubai. So a bit surprising to see these performances. But yeah, the Miami Open does struggle with some of the guys that sell tickets. And they also lost Shelton early. Rune lost to Opelka. So I think they will have a bit of a rough time at the ticket office. On the women's side, we had some upsets as well. Madison Keys lost to Alexandra Ayala, a strong up-and-coming player. Keys, of course, also making the racket switch, if we get into that, with the E-Zone 98. Arendreeva, who won in India Wells, lost to Anisimova. Not shocking that she's a little bit tired, so nothing really strange there. We have Danielle Collins using a white-out racket. It's a Technifiber if you look at the eyelets on the side where you do the knots, but it's something else than she is usually playing. So there's definitely pros all over the place testing new gear. And that's quite fascinating to follow, I find. Maybe some will get bored by it, but I really find it quite interesting. Also, Bianca Andreescu, she is using an E-Zone. At least that is what's seen in her Instagram page instead of the Head Speed or Extreme. I'm not sure exactly what she's using right now. She was using the Speed before, but now she's using an Extreme Cosmetic, but it could still be the Speed with a different design. So I'm not 100% sure. So if you know, feel free to reach out. And overall, the event seems to be running so-so. From what I heard, I haven't been there. So if you've been and you have another view, let your thoughts be heard on tennisnerd.net. Craig Shapiro, well-known tennis podcaster, entrepreneur, whatever you want to call him, he said this on Threads. Wow, this tournament is in shambles. Players bitching about the balls, posting about it being a parking lot, posting footage of traffic. IMG putting their players on show courts over better matches. They screwed up the Fonseca assignments. So bad it was pandemonium. PTPA lawsuit, players tanking. So let's hope it's not as bad as it sounds. I just wanted to hear from you guys if you have visited this event, if it's as bad as it sounds. Fonseca obviously doing amazingly well, but yeah, his fans had a bit of an issue when they moved the match last minute, if I understood this correctly. But by far the biggest news in tennis this week is the PTPA lawsuit, which could shake up the sport pretty badly. According to Brent Gray, who compiles This Week in Tennis, we do this every week on tennisnerd.net, where we summarize what's going on the professional tennis circuit. So the lawsuit done by the Professional Tennis Players Association is on behalf of the entire player population. Some players have said that they're not really behind this. Interestingly, like Novak, who is one of the front figures, the facing figure of PTPA, together with Pospisil, they've been really instrumental in this organization. He's not really said that he's behind it. So it's a quite interesting situation. They are suing tennis governing bodies in the USA, UK, and EU, citing several reasons for the lawsuit, including the prize money formula designed by the tours as unsustainable, and the unsustainable 11-month schedule as well. They also say invasive searches of personal devices. I guess this is all about the doping stuff that's been going on. So 12 players have put their names on this lawsuit filed in New York. I think it's interesting to relate back to the PTPA about the player conditions, and I've always talked a lot about prize money and the lack of it on the lower levels of the tour with friends who are pro players. I have friends who are top 50 players and friends that are top 500 and top 1000 and ex-pros as well, and it's always a topic of conversation also on the podcast that there's not much money on the lower rungs of tennis, and lower being even like in some forms of the Challenger Tour. That's where tennis can be somewhat feasible, but very difficult. And on the Futures Tour is pretty much impossible. That is only like really gonna be a transportation device towards the bigger tours, Challenger, ATP, or WTA. The Futures is not somewhere you want to be lingering around too long, really, because financially it's not going to be great. Unless you make YouTube content, maybe. But otherwise, it's going to be a tricky one. The prize money is relatively low, and the conditions are not great either. So there's something to be done about tennis overall. I've often talked about like having some kind of team format instead. Maybe like a league like they do in other sports, football and so on. But other individual sports as well. Sometimes that they can do like a league where players can stay in kind of one location or not travel all around the world. Chasing these points and tournaments, and have some kind of alternative way of running. And also I've thought about like double elimination format or some kind of round robin format for ATP tournaments and WTA, of course, like where you get more matches, especially on the Futures where it's so expensive to go and lose one round and then leave to another city. Sometimes on the Futures, obviously, you have 3 tournaments in a row in the same location. That is happening more there than on the Challenger Tour, of course. Challenger, you need to travel more. But at least some kind of reform of the system or actually experimenting a bit with the system could be good to make tennis more sustainable, because it seems completely unsustainable in some ways, yet it still works. But I think there's a lot of complaints in the background. And I'm reading this book that I want to shout out called The Racquet by Conor Nyland, who was a strong player from Ireland and around the time of Federer. So I think he beat Federer when he was like 12 or something. Ended up around 100 in the world. And he has a very interesting behind-the-scenes look at playing on the pro tour, but on the kind of lower levels, or not quite, becoming a top 50 player. I mean, he's obviously an amazing player, an amazing athlete, like many of these pros are, even in the top 500 and top 1000. But then to really make a living in tennis and make a name in tennis, you need to start winning matches and get points and stuff like that. It's a tough sport. It's not for the faint of heart, and it usually requires quite deep pockets to be successful. So I can recommend. I'm reading it right now. It would be cool to have him on the podcast if possible at some point. There's also another book I'm eyeing from Christopher Clary called The Warrior. That's the book about Rafa Nadal, and that's supposed to hit shelves in May, I think. And I hope to have Christopher on the pod as well. We talked about his previous book, The Maestro, Roger Federer, that was all about. And this one is about Rafa, the retired Rafa Nadal, who was on the Served podcast. So if you haven't listened to that one, I think it was like a 1-hour interview with Andy Roddick. Andy is a good interviewer, I must say. And Rafa is always fascinating to listen to. He has some Rafaisms and small wisdom quotes, and you learn a lot from how he's thinking, and I think he's a great role model for a lot of young people. So listen to that one on the Served podcast. I really enjoyed it. I had this topic about power and spin rackets yesterday on our second YouTube channel, Tennis Nerd 2, a very innovative name there. And you might ask, like, why would you start a second channel? It seems like there's a good strategy to that. I've seen it from other creators that you have a lot of content, but it's if you post stuff that doesn't get loads of views, you can be punished by the algorithm, and maybe rightly so. But you have content that some people might find interesting, and then you have a second outlet for that is maybe not as important in terms of getting views and so on. So I think it makes sense to have two channels in that sense. Maybe there are other strategies for it. I'm not very good at the social media game, sadly. I just like making content talking about tennis, but maybe there are experts out there who have more of a strategy around this whole thing. But I posted a video on Tennis Nerd 2 with my buddy Robert, who used to play Futures, now a performance coach at SALK, a club in Stockholm that I used to play at. And he tested loads of rackets with me. It was everything from the Solinco Whiteout to the new Head Radical MP, Gravity Tour 98, the Pure Drive, and his regular Pure Aero, the new E-Zones, and so on. And he had some interesting thoughts there. I also discussed then on that post and in that video, using a spin racket versus using a power racket, and those are two categories that are becoming more and more popular also among the pros. You have like Jack Draper, for example, using a kind of Pure Drive style racket with his old Dunlop, the Revo CV 3.0, which I will review. I'm waiting for two to arrive so I can test them, because I haven't tested that racket, although it's an older one. But he's endorsing the Dunlop FX500. That's kind of a Pure Drive racket. We have Mpechi Pericard using the Pure Drive. We see players switching to more powerful rackets all the time. Popperin moved from the PT57A, like the ultimate control racket, to the FX500 Tour from Dunlop, also a power racket, but a 98. So those rackets are becoming more and more popular. You've seen with Tsitsipas and with Bublik trying to get more power and spin from their games. And the question is then, for many club players and also pros, like, should I go from like more spinny racket or a more power-oriented racket, and what are the differences there? And with rackets like the E-Zone and the Pure Drive and the Dunlop FX that I mentioned, which are called power rackets, usually by the color of blue, although it's not a rule, but it seems to be the case that all racket manufacturers agree that blue is power color and the yellow is spin color and so on. But the power rackets, they do give you more free depth. They are stiffer, so more energy return on impact, more stable for their weight, and do generate like quite a lot of pop. But not as much spin and a launch angle. So some players really like to get a high launch angle, high net margin over the net, and then a really heavy kick when the ball hits the court, hits the ground. That's what you get with a spin racket. You're getting that launch angle, you're getting that bounce, and especially with a racket that is now so popular as the Baula Pure Aero, people are, looking into how can I get this annoying like bounce. When you play against someone who hits with it's quite challenging sometimes, because the ball really kicks up into your face. And you don't get that with power racket. You're getting that free depth. They're a little bit more consistent usually on flatter shots, a little bit denser string patterns overall. So you have a bit more of a directional control, while with the spin frames, you need to swing with a higher swing speed and get a little bit more under the ball overall than you need to do with the power rackets. So you might be a flat hitter that wants a higher launch angle, and then a spin racket can work for you. But overall, we're seeing more flat players who hit with a lower trajectory, go for the power rackets, and players who like to play a lot on clay and like that extra bounce on the ball and extra launch over the net to enjoy more like Head Extreme, Diadem Axis, Dunlop SX, Baula Pure Aeros, and so on. There's not a rule around rackets like what you should use. You have to obviously test, but you can look at it this way, like what are you missing from your current choice? And if you want loads of help with depth, then the power racket is a good idea. If you want a higher trajectory and more spin potential, a spin racket could be a good idea. But if you're a control player, like the Blade, the Radical, the Whiteout from Solinco, and so on, I think you will struggle maybe to do that switch from control to adding more. It usually takes some time, and you have to give it time, because you can make a switch and then 1 week later it doesn't feel as good anymore. And you're getting into that tennis honeymoon period where you're playing amazing tennis. We did see Tsitsipas with a new racket win a tournament straight from switching. And now he's not doing as well, although he's not doing badly necessarily. But yeah, this can be a little bit the letdown that usually happens when you're on that high of playing with a new racket. It can give you new energy and new inspiration, but at some point it also becomes normal, and then honeymoon period is over, and then you have to really figure out whether this racket is for you or not. Usually you see players switch back when they start doubting the racket, and this can be premature. It can be maybe the right move. Depends a lot how they read the situation. But it's an interesting topic, and I'm prone, of course, to always switching rackets all the time, and sometimes even in tournament matches I've been playing with 3-4 different rackets. Few people can relate. Maybe some of you listening. I know Henrik can, and we usually discuss this, like the craziness of bringing a racket bag with 3 different rackets, depending on how the match goes. But yeah, it's a little bit fun as well. That's probably why we do it, but it's also some mental issue, I think. You put too much attention to the racket and not enough attention to your own footwork or other parts of your game. But we know that, so it's more about it's a laughing matter in a way. So pro player switches. If you have any spots, reach out, put them in the comments on Instagram or YouTube or on tennisnerd.net. There have been rumors, besides me talking about Andreescu and Collins playing with new rackets, also about Rublev testing new strings. I don't know which ones, so I can't comment more about that. He did lose his first match in Miami, so maybe not much to talk about there. Maybe he's going to go back. I mean, he used to play the Adrenaline, the Luxlon Adrenaline, like the cheaper Luxlon string. I think he's been using the Lynx Tour from Head recently, but I'm not 100% sure. Also, rumors about Djokovic trying a more powerful setup. No idea what that could be, really. But, I would expect that Andy, having switched from his PT57A for so many years to the Ease 100 towards the later stages of his career, like the last half year, maybe he would get some ideas into his head about, like, you need maybe more power, or we can try it to see what happens. But Djokovic is playing well now so far in Miami Open with his old racket, unless they did some customization to it to add power. But I think maybe switching at this point for Novak, who is so physically fit and strong still, might not make a lot of sense. So that's a comment about that. I've had a lot of stuff on the testing block, as usual. Strings, Otoro Tour and Otoro Spin from Tourline. Tourline being a pretty hyped up string brand these days, doing well, getting some airtime from Carousel, who's now 240 in the world, suffering a bit from some shoulder issue, but soon back on the tour. He plays with his own like hybrid setup. They do their own hybrid setups that you can get your own like custom one for your game on tourline.ai. That's a quite interesting concept that I really like. I do try to mix their strings quite a bit. I do like them usually more when they're in a hybrid of some kind, putting the rounder strings in the crosses to make the main strings move more, maybe a shaped string in the mains. But I did like their Otoro Spin string, their 5-sided string, and that really was a good mix of like being a softer polyester, but like giving you quite a decent spin and a good crisp feel. And it's similar in a way in that sense to the True Pro Pure Rush, which is another favorite of mine. I did also like the new Solinco Mac 10, but it was a little softer than I like. Usually, like I personally like a stiffer string, but there are many good soft poly alternatives for you guys who are a bit worried about your arm or just want a softer, more powerful string. You're seeing that on the tour a lot more now with hybrid setups, like with Natural Gut. The Natural Gut string is not going away. You're actually seeing it, I think, more and more, although in a hybrid setup with a polyester string. That's quite common. Goffin, for example, now has Gut in the crosses. He used to play full bed of all the power. Medvedev is back to Gut as well, Gut hybrid. They're all trying to get more pop now that the balls, maybe are slower. Courts slower, but players also hit harder. Look at Joao Fonseca, they hit like crazy now, and you need to really take the initiative and be able to pounce as soon as you get a slightly weaker ball, and that makes the Pro Tour just very, very challenging physically to play at that level, because they are all so good. Anyway, back to the strings. So I can recommend Otoro Spin. Really like that one a bit more than Otoro Tour, which is a bit firmer. more like a tour bite string. 4G maybe not as stiff as 4G, but similar. Like it's a string for you who hit big, which I personally don't, but it gives you a lot of confidence. And Solinco Mac 10 is a bit more of a softer alternative. I also tried a funny string called Grapple Snake Aspera Triplum. Not sure how they came up with that name. I tried it alongside our contributor Simon, who also tests gear with me. It's a very spin-oriented string. It really cuts into the ball, like cuts the felt into little pieces. Has this four-sided rough surface, really to maximize spin. And if you're into that and you really want to, have max spin, maybe you played with kind of four-sided strings before, then this could be worth checking out. Maybe you have an 1820 95 square inch that you want to give some extra life and launch. It was a little too extreme for my liking. I do like that Grapple Snake tried to push the envelope a bit and try new things, but I tend to like a little bit more standard polyester strings, kind of more in the middle of everything, not too much on the extreme side of things, but a very spinny string. Another string I've tested is the upcoming Restring Vivo, which has more properties that I like. Good ball bite, not too soft, not too firm. Nice turquoise color that works in quite a few rackets. So it will be out in a week from now, but I really enjoy it, and some other guys that tested it with me enjoy it too. So that string will be good. I would say it's a little bit firmer than Solinco Mac 10, so more kind of in the middle, or even the Tour Line Tour Spin. But it gives you a good ball bite and some good confidence when you try to swing big. So many strings coming out. It's quite a jungle. We'll try to make updates to the recommended string page now that I've tested so many new strings recently, and give you more recommendations around strings. There is always a consultation service on tennisnerd.net if you want to do that as well. So there's help to be had. When it comes to rackets, I'm getting towards the end of the Dunlop Essex review. Good spin-oriented rackets, really nice stability and comfort, I think, is improved. They have the vibro shield on the throat there. I think it's maybe in other places in the racket as well, but you really feel it in the throat. But it seems to really work because the stability and the comfort is updated quite a bit from the previous version, but it has a bit of a lower launch angle than you'd expect from a spin racket. It's not that kind of bounce and kick and launch as kind of the Aero does. It has more control. So if that's what you like, then check out the Dunlop Essex, the review to come very, very soon. And I had a video for members where I talked about that, strings and other things, but also had Sean and Nikki help me test the Dunlop Essex rackets, and they liked them. So that was interesting. I also talked in that video about my enjoyment of the Nordic Dots Model 100. I was a fan of the 99, did not like the Model 100 as much early on, although I could sense that it was a good racket and Henrik really loved it. But now I've been playing with it more and I really getting into it. Very good control for a 100 square inch racket, more of kind of like a versatile frame with a thinner beam, moves through the air pretty fast, full confidence on shots and so on. So that's been good, and I can string it pretty low tension, like even 20 kilos, 44 pounds, and get some control from it, and that's quite important. So if you're into videos like that, check it out on Patreon or for YouTube members. So I think that's pretty much it for my rambling this week. I know the podcast has been a little bit up and down in terms of going live, because it's just pretty much a one-man band. I have Stefan, my buddy, running the website really well and doing a great job, and people contributing with videos, with pro player spots and writing on tennisnerd.net. But a lot of the talking, a lot of the videos are my doing, and I sometimes get tired of my own voice, or I often get. You'd think probably I'm the most narcissistic guy ever to sit here and talk. I do like tennis a lot, and I do like playing the most, I would say, more than watching. But I do like talking about it and writing about it. That's generally what Tennis Nerd is in many cases, and testing gear and so on, of course. But sometimes I get tired of seeing myself and hearing myself talk. So I think that happens to all content creators these days. But yeah, so it can be a bit of a struggle. I wanted to give you a little bit of an update. If you think this kind of rambling is completely uninteresting and you don't want any more solo pods, it's good to get that feedback too. I'm not sure I will do more, but if people like it, it's a format I could be doing as a part of like a Monday morning rant or something like that, depending on what happens. I do enjoy Nikola Aracic from Intuitive Tennis when he talks on the Pro Tour stuff, but sometimes I don't have time to do that kind of stuff on a regular basis. Even though I keep following what's going on the tour, of course, pretty much every day. I watch a lot of tennis, and not religiously, but if there's interesting matches or storylines unfolding through tennis TV or in Grand Slams and so on. And now we're getting close to the clay court season, which is my favorite part of the season. So that will be exciting. Hopefully we'll see some live tennis as well. We're also planning a tennis trip actually in October with Tennis in Tuscany. They arranged these amazing tennis experiences with like wine tasting, biking around the countryside, cooking classes, and all kinds of romantic Italian stuff that you do in Tuscany. And it looks absolutely amazing. I haven't been there, but it would be a great location for a tennis nerd camp where we would have the local pro there, ex-pro player, give lessons, and then I could give some maybe racket consultations or talk about rackets, and we could enjoy some wine and stuff together there as a tennis nerd trip. We did a little bit of a first tennis nerd thing in Switzerland this year. I started the year like that thanks to Christian, who's a good friend of mine and a very good player. And so we had like just tennis nerd testing for 2 hours, and people turn up and seem to like it. So maybe we could do a whole week or at least 5 days of that. And so I'm keen to see if there's any interest. Obviously, it's not going to be super cheap because it's in Tuscany and all the stay and the food and everything is included, and wine tasting and whatnot. It's a premium experience, and but yeah, I love all that stuff. So I think it would be a nice way to combine hanging out with fellow tennis nerds, talking rackets, and getting better at tennis. So if you have any interest, reach out to us so we know if there's any interest for this type of trip, and we can make it closer to reality. All right, that's it for me ranting today. It's time to head to the court, test some new stuff, and later this week play some tournament match and get my ass kicked, most likely. But that's life. Have a nice week now, and don't forget to play some tennis.